after missing the last one through having an operation on my knee, and I have been told both by members and by officers as well that I wasn't missed, and what a wonderful job Councillor Moxon had done. So I'd like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Moxon for making me not only unloved but unwanted as well, or unneeded. But thank you anyway. It was only his second meeting, and it must have been very daunting, but he came through with flying colours, and people can't wait to tell me. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting. Well, I can't say whether they're an accurate record. Councillor Moxon.
I'd like to formally move those as a true record.
Thank you.
And I'd like to second them, Chairman, and confirm that Councillor Moxon did an excellent job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The minutes have been moved and seconded. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? Yep, those that were there, thank you very much. No one against. Next item, apologies for absence. I have got a number of apologies here. Councillor Carr sends apologies for other reasons, but there's no substitute for him. Councillor Creamer, I believe you are attending in place of Councillor Henry, who is absent for other reasons. Councillor Adair is substituting for Councillor Upton, who is absent for other reasons. Councillor Martin is substituting for Councillor Elizabeth Williamson, who is absent for other reasons. And Councillor Wheeler is substituting for Councillor Butler for, it says, reasons to be confirmed. He's at a meeting of Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee, so I don't know what that counts as, but if... Yeah, well, yes. Yeah. So that's it. Everybody else is present. Thank you. We accept those apologies, of course. Item 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or private interests? No, thank you very much. Right, the first substantive item on the agenda is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's decisions. And as you can see, we've had those, again, divided into two parts. Those that have been referred to the Ombudsman, but the Ombudsman has dismissed them basically out of hand. I don't know that we need to spend any time on those, but we have got two cases this time, and it's pleasing to note that there are fewer this time that the Ombudsman has found against. The first one was a complaint against the Adult Social Care Department, and Joe, I don't know whether you want to say anything at this point before I bring in Sue Batty to explain what went wrong and what they're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I've got nothing particularly to say, Chair, unless there's a question for me. But
right.
So I'll hand
well,
over
we can
to
pick
Sue.
those up afterwards. Right. Sue Batty. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chair. So the outline is as in the report, and this was a gentleman that we were responsible for funding and was placed in a care home in Lincolnshire. When he was admitted to hospital, they found a number of injuries which was found to be due to poor care from the home. The safeguarding responsibilities when we've got people out of area rest with that safeguarding area. So it was Lincolnshire's team that did that investigation, and their quality team is also responsible for the monitoring quality of care. So what we found when we looked into the details was that positively, there'd been no previous complaints about Mr. X's care or other residents. There were no ongoing concerns at that point with the care home. However, obviously, this instance was very distressing for all. In terms of what happened, the care home took responsibility and self-referred to CQC. So they acknowledged that something had gone wrong within their care home at that point, and they have taken action against the staff concerned. What ourselves and Lincolnshire found was that the care home had acted appropriately despite this really terrible incident. The lessons learned for ourselves, we will have in such cases the Ombudsman finds the council responsible because we funded the placement and arranged it. So we will make sure all the recommendations in the report are acted on, and we're also going to review how we our advice and guidance and staff awareness of how we should be liaising with other teams out of area when they are responsible for safeguarding inquiries for people who we have funded and arranged the placement. And similarly for out of area process, jointly monitoring the quality of care and how teams that have responsibility for that link with other areas to make sure that there's earlier engagement and we're more proactive in the future.
Case reading it, I was quite shocked, to be honest. And I know we as the County Council were not directly involved, but I remain concerned that we didn't follow up safeguarding inquiries in respect of one of our residents as soon as possible. You've heard assurances from Sue Batty that that will not happen. They will be followed up in future. But are there any other questions from members as far as this is concerned? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I've read this incredibly sad story of Mr. Y. It's only right and proper that this council does apologise for his treatment and their part in placing him in this home. I do believe, however, that an apology isn't sufficient, and just to ensure that this never happens again, we would like to see a root and branch review of all of our out-of-county placements. I'm aware of the issues that came around pre-COVID in the summer of 2019, where Mr. Y was placed in the care of the old rectory in Salixby in Lincolnshire, after his wife got to the point where she couldn't care for him any longer. The care home have offered unreserved apologies to the family after the government social care ombudsman found that the staff failed to follow his care plan, and which led to significant injuries. Could this committee make a recommendation to the Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee to look into the wider issues highlighted by this extremely traumatic case? Thank you.
Could you advise us as to what you do in respect to checking on out-of-county accommodation before anybody is placed into it?
So we would liaise with the quality team in Lincolnshire in this respect. So as I said, we did that, and there was no concern. CQT had no concerns at that point. So those are the checks we would make. We also have the responsibility to do an annual review, which had taken place. There'd been no other concerns from any family members raised previously about the care nor about any other residents. So the issues for us is we undertook all our duties in respect of arranging and reviewing the placement. The areas that were identified was the communication between our safeguarding teams and Lincolnshire safeguarding teams and the communication there. Sadly, there wouldn't have been any different outcome in terms of what Nottinghamshire County Council did in terms of prevention. But we do need the quality teams to work very closely. But Lincolnshire quality teams have no other concerns raised about this home at the time. Neither did the CQC. And it does seem to have been an issue that was really caused by a small number of staff who have been dealt with in the care homes HR policies as it says to immediately suspended.
So a root and branch review of out-of-county placements would not be likely, from what you've just said, to throw up any issues
No, because we do review everybody's entitled staff under the Care Act annual review. We are having to, due to the intense pressures on our workforce and the increased demand from COVID that are sort of well known at the moment. We are prioritising, so we prioritise and make sure reviews are done in order of those care homes where we know that our quality team or other quality teams in CQC have concerns. So we do prioritise in that way.
So I note your point, but I don't think there would be any purpose served. We're not likely to get any additional information at this stage. This committee, of course, keeps a watching brief on all complaints that come in, and whilst this is, I think, an horrific example, I think it is restricted to a few individuals on this occasion. Councillor Creamer, did you indicate?
Yeah, just for clarification for me, I've noticed if you go through the full investigation and the recommendations there, the very last one, the person to know property to support the person and their family. Yeah, in the 4 bullet points agreed on the page 17, that particular one isn't in there unless I've missed it. And I was just asking about their family, how they're being supported, because they are with it, assuming they are actually within the county council. So just asking the inconsistency on page 10, the very last recommendation on it is to support the family, but it doesn't seem to be in the 4 bullet points on page 17.
Did you pick that up, the support being offered to the family?
Yes. Well, the support was offered to the family immediately. The report says once Lincolnshire told us the outcome of safeguarding and the concerns, we arranged an alternative placement. So he did not return to the old rectory when he left hospital. And we will, as part of the apology, the teams will be in touch with the family as well.
Okay, I think that covers your point, doesn't it? Thank you. Councillor Payne, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I think you struck the right tone at the beginning. I mean, it's a shocking read. You know, without going through case by case, I think your focus in, if you like, on the issue about the safeguarding element and the recommendations, I think, is the most pertinent point for us as a committee. And you know, reading about issues like pressure sores, 23 skin tears on the body, possible dehydration, not eating the previous day at all. Injured and bleeding from the body, at points. You read that and you just think, what a horrific situation that must have been for the family. And I guess taking a lead from you really, Chair, and the point you made at the beginning, I think for me the 3rd bullet point of agreed action from the report of the Ombudsman about the council, where the council has placed somebody, even if they are not under our direct care, and they're out of county placement, and I know you've reflected on this, Sue, in what you've just said to the committee, is absolutely essential here, I think, for me, because if you are a family member, son, daughter, partner, or whatever of that individual who's in that care home, you're on the one hand concerned about the situation they're already in terms of their health and their care, and at the same time, you're then having to potentially trail through how you make a complaint, how you get hold of the right person, how you put across the case, which all of us know as councillors and people who are in the system isn't always the easiest thing to do. Set aside when you've got concerns about the health of your own relative. And I think the point for me here, notwithstanding, and I think you're really right to say this, Chair, that this is clearly not a case where, the large portion of the blame is being levied on the county council. And I think it's important that we say that for our staff, and that, as the Chair says, this is, potentially isolated incident. And as you said, Sue, with a few staff, I think there's a really crucial point here about if you are somebody who is a family member in a desperate situation, you need the muscle of the county council and the support of the county council to stand up for you and to speak up to some of these organisations. They will have been feeling in a really desperate situation. And we all know as elected members, sometimes trying to get your point across to some of these institutions and even find the right person to communicate to and be heard is not the easiest of situations. So, you've reflected on it, Sue, but I think we need to take a really, really proactive stance on this, even if we are not directly responsible. Clearly, Lincolnshire had a role to play here. But they will have been a really desperate situation, the family, and I think we need to demonstrate that we're alongside them, even if we're not immediately responsible for some of the issues that are highlighted in the case, so that they feel that they've got somebody alongside them to support them and guide them through the situation. Because God forbid, I don't know what I would have done if I was in this situation and it was a a family member, you would have been horrified. And I think trying to think rationally about how you flag these issues and how you find the right appropriate person in this circumstance will have been really difficult for loved ones who are close to the situation. So, you know, I think the context in which you set this, Chair, is absolutely right, but it's that recommendation that really concerns me, and I think we need a very clear demonstration from the County Council that we are going to be proactive in immediately getting involved and making sure we're alongside the individual and the family where safeguarding issues have been raised, particularly where there's such serious safeguarding issues as those that have been highlighted in this individual case.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And in the status of agreed action, it does say, I think it's more than, it does say to remind workers to follow up on out-of-county safeguarding inquiries. And I think that really sums up what you have been saying. And the message needs to be taken back to frontline staff very clearly that this is not acceptable, and we do expect more immediate involvement and intervention. We hope very much that this is a one-off. Are you content that I move on? Thank you. Thank you for that. The next one is Children and Young People's Services. This is an unusual one as well. I think we can say it's going to be a one-off situation. Money that was available for short breaks for obvious reasons last year couldn't be spent. The money, it was agreed, could be spent on certain pieces of equipment and other things, but only from approved suppliers. And there seems to have been, in the view of the Ombudsman and indeed of the complainant, some miscommunication, though we doubt that. And I think it revolves around the fact that we tried to, or we did communicate through a school that itself was undergoing considerable difficulties and had seriously failed an Ofsted inspection, and that is the background to the situation. We've got Lawrence Jones here from the department. I don't know whether there's anything you want to add to that.
I'll just very briefly outline. I mean, short breaks are a discretionary payment we make to the families of children who are disabled to provide activities which give them some respite from caring. So often they either have a personal assistant who does something with the child, or they attend certain activities in a youth centre or similar. And in this case, during the pandemic, because of the restrictions placed on some of the activity, particularly for personal assistants, couldn't take place because of social distancing and rules, etc. We were asked to be flexible with some of the funding, and we provide some of it as commissioned services and some of it as direct payments where there's a budget held by the family. In terms of flexibility, we decided that in some cases, particularly where people had a protracted period of not having services, that they were able to spend it in a different way to buy some kind of equipment or some kind of activities that they could do at home. And we set a series of rules around that and set out the eligibility, which we still feel we did relatively clearly. I think some of the communications went via schools, and in this case it went through a school which has subsequently academised. So between the point at which they made the communication and us dealing with the complaint, they academised. So some of the records in effect are not available anymore. So I think at the end of this we decided that it's a relatively small amount of money. It's less than £200 that in normal circumstances would have been available to the family to use anyway. We've got a gap in terms of the evidence, in terms of exactly what the school said and whether that clouded the communication in some way. And to that end, we've decided that really we have to respect the LGO's judgment in this case and not challenge it any further. So we've done that. We think the circumstances are unlikely to recur, but we will be really careful both around the communications that we make around eligibility for services and how that might be communicated through third parties as well. So we will reflect on that going forward.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne.
But just on that specific point about communication, Lawrence, I take your point about third party and the point about, in the County Council's defence, we think that communication was really clear in this circumstance. Is there a learning point there about when we're talking about critical services like this that are about respite for people who are in quite difficult circumstances, going the extra mile and sometimes directly communicating with those individuals? And I know there are issues about we had COVID and getting to people individually and there are costs associated, etc. But I think in particular services like this, well, you're talking about vulnerable people, and as the chair said at the start, you're talking about often vulnerable, vulnerable children as well as vulnerable others. The best course of action probably is through direct communication, because it sounds like to me here, exactly as you said, this is a problem of communication by a third party, and as a result, the county councils ended up getting kind of their knuckles wrapped as a result.
Yes, if I just pick up on that, I think that's absolutely right. And there's probably somewhere in the region of 1,500 children and families who are eligible for this. And we've probably got, between 3,000 and 4,000 who have actually got disabilities. And we were making regular checks in relation to a whole number of things to do with the welfare of disabled children during that period. And we're prioritising those who were most in need and families that were most struggling. I accept that probably the ideal would have been to have direct communications around those who are eligible rather than send out what was complicated in truth. And the rules and directions from central government had changed several times during the year. So no doubt the families did become confused, and I can understand why. So I completely accept that would have been the ideal. And I think in terms of just what we're trying to do in children's services towards developing relationships with families where they feel able to communicate with us rather than a bureaucratic approach, that's exactly where we'd want to be. And I think we can definitely reflect on that and how we continue to do that better over time.
Yeah, I think this is well, hopefully it's a one-off, because we're not going to go into the situation that we had last year. And I think it is, whilst I never like admitting to something that we don't feel we got wrong, really, I think it's a pragmatic approach in the circumstances. So I've noticed that I didn't move the recommendations. I'm sure that's a mistake that Councillor Moxon didn't make. So I will move the recommendation now.
I'll second those recommendations, Chair.
All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Thank you. Right. Thank you, Lawrence. Item number 5 on the agenda is a report in my name, the Audit Findings Report. Apparently it's in my name because I sign it off, I believe, and it's me that goes to prison if it's wrong. Is that it? No? I don't go to prison. Oh, good. That's a relief. Anyway, the report is in front of you, duly signed off, or will be signed off by me. And can I move the recommendation that's set out on page 2?
I'll second those recommendations and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions that members or officers wish to make? Nigel, do you want to say anything on this report in my name?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Only to say that for reference, the fact is that the accounts an unqualified opinion as usual for the County Council, albeit it was slightly late than the anticipated 30th of September. It's still a fantastic achievement for the County Council in terms of the way it manages its accounts. And then they were signed off on Monday and are on our intranet. So again, thank you for your assistance as well, Councillor.
Thank you. I think that's something to be celebrated, the fact that it is an unqualified opinion. I know we've got some very highly paid officers to do all this for us, who don't have time to take second jobs and that sort of thing, or do you? I don't know. And nevertheless, I think we should congratulate them on such a remarkable achievement. Councillor Payne.
I mean, I just concur with that first and foremost, Chair, and say congratulations to Nigel, but also the broader team involved in this. I think particularly in light of the situation we've had with the pandemic, and particularly in light of, notwithstanding some of the reductions in funding we've had, just how large the budget continues to be, and the spend, the money in and out continues to be, I think, to have arrived in this position, which is pretty much where you've been for the last number of years, I think is testament to the professionalism of the officers, and I'd completely concur with you in that regard, Chair. It's a minor point, really, just to prove I've actually paid attention to your report, Nigel. There's reference made in the audit adjustments, and I don't want you to go into huge detail, Nigel, I just want some assurance about the section around employee remuneration, note 44, so it's page 35 in the yellow pages, I think, if there's a line through it, I think it's 35 or 36. note 44, there are 2 lines there. I'm not going to read them out, but it refers to reference around incorrect banding for one of our corporate directors. And I just the question I wanted to ask was, is that typographical presentation error, or were we wrongly paying one of our staff? And if so, has it been resolved? Has it been resolved? And also a note that it relates to the point about comparators as well, which presumably will have been information that will have been our pay policy statement. So has all that been tidied up and amended? Because obviously that's a document that's on public record.
Yeah, thank you for your comments as well, Michael. But yeah, it was just a typographical error. So yeah.
Okay. Councillor Martin, are you putting your hand up? Right. Yes, go on then. What you got written down?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a very thorough report. I've read all of it. Page 26 of the appendix from the report from Grant Thornton speaks of areas of significant weakness and outlines the fact that Council has identified savings to achieve a balanced budget as part of its medium-term financial strategy. They're listed as 17.6 million in 22-23, 14.6 in 23-24, 15.5 in 24-25. That's 47.7 million of savings. At the same time, we're still going ahead with a 20 million plus investment in Nottinghamshire scheme, building new offices that maybe we ought to appraise whether we really need. We're close to 600 million in debt, and the Council has seen huge uncertainty with regards to major infrastructure projects like the Gedlin Access Road, which went 5 million over budget. Having an open checkbook with regards to the A614 and 6097 major route network, and selflessly agreeing to underwrite any overspend. Then there's the proposed development on Topwigay Farm, which has already gone up £1 million in 4 months because of rising building costs, planning issues, and of course Brexit. We're having to borrow another 70 million this year just to balance the books. Do you believe that the lack of detail over the Council's debts should be reflected within the report? And I don't know about the how it works, but can you sign off the accounts without the value for money overhaul? You know, the value for money spending.
To answer that, yes, you can, because I already have done. So that's dealt with that. This is the audit findings report for 2020-21. I mean, the points you raise are interesting points, but I'm not sure that this is the relevant committee to be discussing them. This is the audit report on the last financial year. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Nigel?
No, there's nothing that I need to add, Chairman. I think you're right in terms of it's the statement of accounts for last year. Yeah, all of those matters are a matter that's been discussed and relevant for Finance Committee and full Council.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, if there are no further questions, the report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Right. The next item on the agenda is the decision to opt into the national scheme for audit appointments managed by Public Sector Audit Appointment, PSAA, the appointing person. I think the report is quite clear. It seems to me to be a no-brainer, so I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll second the recommendation and reserve my right to speak.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne and then Councillor Creamer.
It's a point well rehearsed. I'll just be really short, Chair. I think I flagged it previous, not the last meeting, I wasn't here like you, but the previous meeting to that. I mean, this makes eminent sense, doesn't it? We're sort of trying to play in a very small field here of public sector auditors, and I think we're left with very little option other than this option that's presented. So I think it makes eminent sense, but it would be remiss if we weren't still asking the question about what concerns you, Nigel, and others have got around the fee setting level and the issues that there continue to be in the sector about fee setting, and clearly a number of authorities found themselves in a position through the PSSA arrangements where a fee was set, and then you suddenly find yourself with arguments around additional burdens, etc., and the fee is well north of where it was originally set, which ultimately, as I said in the last but one meeting, it's taxpayers' money, isn't it? And you know, this committee is charged with making sure that we're getting value for money for taxpayers and making sure that we're holding to account those decisions. So, notwithstanding, I think that this is the right decision, as you said, Chair. I just want to be satisfied that you know, aren't unduly concerned about those issues, because it seems to me they haven't been resolved. They're affecting district councils. They're certainly affecting us at the Fire Authority. And when I say fees well north of where they were, I'm talking about thousands and thousands, you know, tens of thousands of pounds, which is taxpayers' money. So just a bit of elucidation about that point would be appreciated, Nigel.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Yeah, a very good points. And I think the issue is about the complex nature in terms of the way that the external audit framework is put together. And the fact is that the FRC can set out additional requirements for external auditors, albeit some of those are down to some high-level failures from external auditors in the private sector that has an implication for local authority audit. And they're done after the audit fees were set by the PSAA. And so I think the PSAA recognised that and are trying to leave it for a much later consultation process for setting the fees, but it still leaves us wide open for if there are changes around the way audit should be undertaken. And again, it's unfortunate that I think some of our external auditors will again be subject to scrutiny for some failures of some high-level audit into the private sector that will inevitably mean that some of these fees are going to go up. And as you say, you're absolutely right in terms of it's a small pool. And even though the Redmond review suggested that there was the government ought to make some recommendations to try and widen that pool, that is not going to be possible. And it's about standards in terms of external audit. And there's been some concern, though, for a number of years for a lot of treasurers in terms of the quality of the audit. And addressing that requires additional finance and additional costs to meet those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. It sort of links into that. No problem with linking with the scheme, etc. But just for confirmation that good practice is normally every 3 years to 5 years to change audits, or at least look into changing them. And as I understand it, this scheme, you're not necessarily going to get the same auditors, so it's actually doing the job for you. Is that the case?
Yeah, so it's going out to tender, and it depends on the way that they set the lots out in terms of how they're done. I think one of the issues, speaking to Keith earlier, is that in the past we've had the same auditor at the county level as we've had at the district level, and this time I think he's made it slightly difficult because we've had different auditors, which has caused some communication issues between auditors. But nevertheless, I think it's just one of those issues that we just have to live with.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. If we can move on then to item number 7, which is the follow-up of internal audit recommendations. And this is the regular 6-monthly report on the progress being made with implementing actions agreed from the internal audit reviews. And the report presents the summary position for priority 1 and priority 2 actions arising from audit reports in 2019-20 and 2021. Good progress has been made since the previous update in some areas, and those are summarised in the tables on pages 3 and 4 of the report. However, some actions remain problematic and overdue, and paragraph 9 shows the age profile of the outstanding actions. One of those areas of concern is the action to implement a reconciliation process between the Council's pensioner records and its pensioner payroll. And clearly that is a matter of concern. And we've got today Sarah Stevenson, the Group Manager for the Business Service Centre and the Employee Services Centre, who's going to give us some wider context on what's being done to put that right. So, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Good afternoon, everyone. Absolutely, this is obviously an important requirement to ensure that the pension payments that we are holding against pensioners in our pension administration system is the same as the actual payment that we're paying out on a monthly basis. Because we're paying out over to about 36,000 pensioners these days. With regards to this particular reconciliation, I think it is important that we set it against the context of some other national initiatives that were also driving a reconciliation of our payments. And one of those national projects is the Guaranteed Minimum Pension, which was driven by HMRC. So I think when determining the work that we needed to do to undertake the reconciliation, what we've tried to do is to scope that work so that actually we have an effective and efficient use of our resources, but also having a look at the work that we need to do against the Guaranteed Minimum Pension, as well as the reconciliation. We had to consider that it may well be that we needed to communicate to members about some potential changes in their payments. Now, that could be both a positive, but it could be a negative impact on their pension. So I think it was important that we joined those two pieces of work together. Unfortunately, we were impacted in that decision by HMRC themselves, who should have come back to us with a reconciliation file actually in January 2019. But actually they didn't come back with that information until July 2020. However, in that intervening period of time, and acknowledging that this is a complex piece of work that also we're required to do by the pension regulator, we have provided regular update reports to Pensions Committee, but also we have linked this work into our pension transformation programme. So I think in isolation, if you look at this in isolation, it would be fair to say that we haven't met the delivery, but I think it's much more important that we look at the wider context and also the other piece of work that we're doing around data auditing and improvement, which again is a requirement on us from the pension regulator. We have provided regular updates to internal audit over the last couple of years, and we have also updated our scheme actuary Barnett Waddingham, and we are now coming towards the end of this particular work. I think the other thing that's come out from the work is that ultimately we're going to work so that we drive all our pension payments straight into the payroll system. So ultimately we'd be eliminating the need to reconcile two systems together, and that really does need to be the future direction of travel. Thank you.
On that, Councillor Payne.
Just specific, thank you, Sarah, and I'm sure this is an absolutely mammoth task. If you just think about that figure you've just highlighted of 36,000 pensioners, so I don't envy you and the rest of the staff. There's reference in the yellow pages which elaborates on the point to matching work being in progress and discrepancies in the number and value of records between the two systems. I appreciate you won't want to go into fine detail about individual cases, Sarah, but can you give us a flavour of what that discrepancy is in terms of number and value? Because clearly there is a huge risk here for the authority. 36,000 pensioners, the amount of money being paid out, the potential risk. If we're not asking questions of elected members, about this issue, frankly, we're not doing our job. So it's highlighted in the report, just a flavour or context of what the number and value is, or the proportion, or whatever you feel appropriate is to share and divulge with us would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I'm just actually looking at the latest update. So I won't talk about monetary value. I think it's probably about numbers of records. So for example, within our payroll system, we have payment records for 40,008 payments, where within our pension system that figure is about 2,000 under that, so 38 odd thousand, and that balance has been accounted for and where necessary, we have implemented various tasks to deal with that particular difference there. So what it also means is that we are paying through our payroll some gratuity payments, which are for individuals who weren't entitled to join the pension scheme back many years ago, and they don't hold a UPM record, which is our pension administration system. But we understand the reasoning behind that. Thank you.
No. You'll see that there are still a number of priority 1, priority 2 actions that are outstanding from a fair length of time. And in the yellow pages, we've said that there will be a follow-up in 6 months. Now, I have said that if we don't, if there isn't satisfactory progress, then we want senior officers in front of this committee to give us an explanation why that it's not being implemented. Councillor Payne, you wanted to come back?
Not specifically, sorry, Chair, just on the pensions thing, fine, but just in support of the point you made. And I just wanted to draw attention to 2 particular priority 1 actions that concern me and ought to concern all of us. Staff declaration of interest has been dragging on since 2019 and isn't resolved. That is a major issue if we've got staff who are walking into committees and decision-making rooms and potentially aren't, as is highlighted here, declaring an interest. And that shouldn't be an issue that isn't difficult to resolve. And there's some commentary around that, but it says, you know, we could be waiting another 6 months. And the risk there for the county council is you've got members of staff taking part or guiding elected members through a decision where potentially they've got a serious conflict of interest. So that concerns me. And the other one that, I mean, they should all concern us, as you said, Chair, but the other one that gravely concerns me is payroll chief executives department. There's clearly an ongoing issue in spite of some attempt to action, which I think you know, those who are involved in this should be given credit for, around overtime payments and timesheets, where not just exclusively to, but it seems that in our schools we've got people proactively signing off their own overtime and timesheets, and this is taxpayers' money. Now, I'm not suggesting that those people who are signing off their overtime and timesheets are doing anything wrong, but while ever that system is in place, it is open to people doing something wrong, and I don't think waiting another 6 months on that work is satisfactory. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 issues and stand in support of the point you've just made, Chair, about we need some expedition around these, you know, very quickly. And if there isn't a good reason why they're not taking place, then frankly somebody should come in here and explain to us why they're not.
Yeah, we're to reassure you, we're not waiting 6 months. What we've said is that when the next report comes in 6 months, if there hasn't been appropriate progress, then we as members will expect a full explanation as to why, because as you've pointed out, these things are serious. As far as declarations of interest, of course, officers should, as a matter of course anyway, be declaring interest, pecuniary and non-pecuniary, as it is on the agenda. So, yes, they may need more guidance, but it is there for them to declare that interest. But the position in schools, I think, as you say, is probably because it's the methods they've always employed. There's no intention to defraud, but you've got not only got to be clean, you've got to be seen to be clean in this day and age. And I take your point, and I think the message has been well understood by relevant officers, and I think we can rely on Mr. Disney to ensure that things go in the right direction, particularly as he's got the full backing of this committee. Okay. Recommendations moved and seconded. All those in, I will move them then. Seconded?
I'll second those recommendations.
All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. The next item on the agenda, item 8, is the Internal Audit Progress Report. This is the regular progress report from Internal Audit, setting out the outcomes of Term 1 work and the plan for Term 3. In Term 1, the Council remained in response mode to a significant extent. Nonetheless, many important pieces of planned audit work were carried out. The plan for Term 3 has been put together after consultation with the corporate leadership team and its coverage is again a blend of the Council's core processes and intelligence-based risk. The audit team continues to meet most of its performance measures and is seeing real benefits now from its apprentice, graduate placement programmes. And to that end, I'm delighted to welcome to today's committee 2 of our internal audit apprentices, and I don't mean Nigel Stevenson, got somebody far better looking, Emily Jackson and Patrick Hoban. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Patrick Hoban, who are sitting at the back there. As I said to them, if we've got to suffer through this, they ought to as well, to see what it's really like at the sharp end. They tell me that they're enjoying working for Nottinghamshire County Council in their role as graduate apprentices, but then I wouldn't expect them to say any different. Not while senior officers were in attendance, but they might have a quiet chat afterwards. We're delighted to see you this afternoon and hope you find it interesting, enjoyable, stimulating, or anything else you can think of. But you're welcome anyway, and we hope you enjoy your stay with Nottinghamshire County Council and that you complete your training satisfactorily. They tell me this is their first time in County Hall. I move the recommendation which is set out on page 6 of the report.
I'll second that recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Nope. In that case, can we go to the vote? All those in favour? Anyone against? No. Thank you. Right. Item 9 is the governance update. The aim of this regular report is to refresh the annual governance statement throughout the year and to use it as a live document to keep the effective governance of the Council under periodic review. It does this by updating the most significant governance issues and secondly by tracking progress. The corporate leadership team and other senior officers of the Council provide their input into these periodic reviews, and members are invited to offer their perspective on what they see as the Council's key governance issues. To help with this, the report includes a link to the Council's local code of corporate governance, which the committee reviewed at its meeting in June. So I move the recommendation as set out on page 4.
I second those recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Councillor Payne.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's obviously, as you would expect, reference made to page 120 of the pack, which I think is page 2 of the specific report. The fair funding review and business rates retention. There's commentary there around anticipated announcement in the Chancellor's budget, November 2021, which wasn't forthcoming. I don't seek to make a party political point here, Chair. Let me just make that clear from the outset. But we're no clearer post the budget where we're going with fair funding review or with business rates review. In fact, actually, there was stony silence on both of the issues. The point I just want to make, and the question I'm asking is, directly above that in the report is reference made to financial resilience and sustainability. And while I don't want a big debate here about the issues that were in the budget, that is a debate for another place, quite concur with the point that the Chair made earlier. I just want to ask you, Nigel, as our Section 151 officer, they're clearly flagged as risks for us. We were clearly anticipating some certainty in November. That's not been forthcoming. Where does that leave us in terms of the commentary that you've set out here in the medium-term financial plan and the headwinds that we've faced in terms of COVID, etc., notwithstanding the decisions we've taken in Budget Council around the medium-term financial plan, because they are clearly 2 big pieces of work that could have a massive impact on us. So, what's your latest thinking? Is it keeping you awake at night? And, what's your kind of latest view about this? Because they're 2 massive issues for us as a county council.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. You're right in terms of it's silent on fair funding and the business rates retention. In fact, the writing's on the wall, I think, for anything in terms of fair funding and business rates retention. I wouldn't necessarily think that I spend sleepless nights thinking about the financial sustainability. It's something that the authority is addressing. It's got a fantastic history of recognising what the financial issues are that faces the local authority, particularly with increasing demand and the reduction as we have faced in terms of funding from central government. But at the same time, the autumn statement did give us a snippet of maybe better news in terms of what the local government settlement may be for next year, at least. But we won't know the details of that until the actual provisional settlement comes out as part of our pre-Christmas present from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. What the external auditor, I think, if I was to ask him that question, when it came to the value for money study, which is, I think, was raised by a councillor about signing these off without the value for money study, as it have in previous years, has looked at the way the authorities have got that track record of identifying need and knowing what the financial issues are and actually having a proper plan to solve that. It's right that we recognise there's a gap, and the authority and the members, I know the members here at this administration take it very seriously in terms of making sure we have a balanced budget, and that's what we will do. So, and I've got every confidence when it comes to the February setting budget, we will have a balanced budget for next financial year.
Okay, thank you. The report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, thank you. And we come to the last item on the agenda, which is the work programme, which has been set out on page on the yellow pages at the end of the pack, and we have a recommendation to basically note the work programme, which I'm happy to move.
I'll second that, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
comments or questions on the work programme? If not, can we go to the vote? All those in favour? No one against. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your attendance. And I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.